Christmas nights always felt like silence to me. As a kid, I watched bright streets on TV, windows glowing, fake snow, laughter that seemed to belong to another planet. In our house, Christmas was never that loud. It was the sound of a kettle cooling down, the click of a lock, a random channel murmuring in the background. Ordinary, safe, uneventful. Years later, in a foreign winter, when I showed up for a Christmas night shift at a logistics facility outside the city, the only thought in my head was simple. This will end. Morning will come. That's how the brain protects itself. Even when you sense danger, you cling to routine. Coffee, fluorescent hum, door locks, patrol schedules. Normal is the thin wall between you and panic. And because that night began normal, I still taste metal when I talk about what happened next. The site was huge: warehouses, offices, cold storage units, loading ramps, long corridors where the lights never felt warm. Busy during the day, hollow at night. Christmas holiday meant it was emptier than usual, but not abandoned. Some workers, a night supervisor, 2 security guards, and cameras that never blinked. I was stationed in the main gate booth, a small box of glass and heat too warm for winter, 2 monitors, CCTV and the entry logs, a radio, a visitor book, a scanner, keys hung in labeled slots. My partner Brian was doing the ramp patrol. Before he left, he'd grumbled, "Of course we get stuck with Christmas." I'd laughed. At 10:40 p.m., I refilled my coffee. Outside, light snow began to fall, the wind tapping the barrier chain like impatient fingers. Someone had strung Christmas lights on a few trees a week. Earlier, now they swayed and flickered in the wind, like the site itself was blinking. The cameras showed the usual: empty corridors, gray ramps, snowfall under a floodlight. Beyond the fence line was darkness and the suggestion of woods. The night supervisor had left a message earlier. Zortzoro quick sweep. If everything's normal, report. New Year's has a midnight. Christmas has one too. Even if no one admits it, the moment you're officially inside the holiday, and the world pretends it's different, I didn't believe in that. At 11:15 p.m., Brian's voice crackled through the radio. "Ramps are clear, just those lights are flickering again." "Wind," I said. "Electrical." "Maybe," he replied, "but I swear I heard a door slam a minute ago." That could be anything in a warehouse. Metal expands, hinges shift, wind finds gaps. I told him we'd check later, because the night was still normal. At 11:57 p.m., I noticed something on one of the screens. Camera 7, the rear corridor of the cold storage unit. Dim lighting, glossy floor. At the end, an authorized personnel-only door. The corridor was supposed to be empty, but there at the far end near the corner was a shape. Not clear enough to call a person, more like a shoulder intruding into frame. A dark presence where nothing should be. I narrowed my eyes, zoomed in. The image was grainy. The shape didn't move. What was wrong wasn't that it was dark. Shadows exist. It was that the shape didn't match the lighting. It looked pasted, like it wasn't being cast by anything, like it had been laid on top of reality. My pulse jumped. I hated myself for it. Night shift does that. Your brain fills in gaps, searches for meaning. I stared. The screen flickered, brief static, a ripple of noise, and the shape vanished. Then my radio hissed. The voice that came through wasn't Brian's, or it was almost like someone trying to imitate his rhythm, but certain syllables sounded rounded, pre-recorded. "Door open," the voice said. "Brian!" I spoke into the mic. "Which door?" No answer. Just white noise, then a metallic ticking in the static. I held the radio closer to my ear, and inside the hiss, a whisper slipped through, faint but perfectly clear. "Merry Christmas." It sounded like a child, but muffled, like speaking through cloth. Cold spread through my stomach. "Brian," I snapped. "Don't mess with me." "Where are you?" Brian's real voice answered, distant. "I'm at the ramps." "What's up?" A voice came through. "Sounded like you." He chuckled. "These radios pick up weird interference sometimes." "Ghost station." "Happens out here." "Ghost station." I forced a laugh I didn't feel. "Let's do the midnight sweep early," I said. "Together." "Give me a minute," he replied. "Checking the light panel." "I'll meet you." I grabbed my coat, my flashlight, and stepped out. The cold slapped my face. Snow had begun to settle. My boots cracked it with each step. As I locked the booth door, I saw something that made my breath catch. In the snow a few meters past the barrier, there was a single footprint. One, by itself. The barrier was down, the fence intact. There were no tracks leading to it. No tracks away. Just one bare footprint perfectly outlined. I crouched and stared at it. Even the curve of the toes was visible. My mind split into two voices. Someone's pranking you. Who walks barefoot in snow on Christmas night? I looked beyond the lighted area, past the fence. Darkness thick as a wall. For a brief moment I felt watched. Not saw, not heard, felt. Brian arrived a minute later, flashlight bouncing. What's wrong? Look. He knelt over the footprint. His face did what mine had done. Shifted through half a dozen explanations. None of them holding. How is it? Only one. He muttered. I don't know. He scanned the barrier, the fence, the surrounding ground. Finally, he forced a shrug. Bird? He offered weakly. It's a bare foot, I said. He didn't answer. He scuffed snow over it with his boot, covering it like you'd cover something you didn't want to keep seeing. People do stupid stuff on holidays, he said. Let's sweep. We walked into the facility. The wind eased. That made it worse. Silence is never neutral at places built for noise. Near the cold storage corridor, the temperature dropped sharply. The authorized personnel-only door looked normal. Closed, locked. Brian tested it. It held. See, he said. Normal. We turned to leave. That's when he stopped. Do you hear that? I listened. At first, nothing. Then far away, a sound like a bell. Not the cheerful jingle of Christmas. More like a wrong note. Metal striking metal. Brian raised his flashlight. It's coming from inside. We don't need to go in, I said. We don't have the key. If someone's in there, he replied. Cold storage. They could freeze. He was right. It would be criminal to ignore. He checked the lock again. Supervisor has the key. The bell sound stopped. And then, from beneath the door, a thin line of liquid began to seep out. At first, my brain refused to label it, because the room was cold. Liquid shouldn't move like that. Brian crouched, touched it with his finger. He lifted his hand. His fingertip was red, blood. A knot tightened in my throat. Brian took a step back. Okay, he whispered. Not normal. The blood spread across the snow in a narrow line. Red on white. The kind of contrast your eyes remember even when you close them. The radio crackled. The supervisor's voice came through. Status? Brian pressed the talk button. His voice trembled. Cold storage doors leaking blood. A pause. Then the supervisor's voice, flat as a schedule. Do not enter, return. The words were reasonable. The tone wasn't. No shock, no questions. No, are you safe? Just return. Brian tried again. Call emergency, police. The supervisor repeated, unchanged. Return. And the radio went dead. Brian stared at me. What the hell does that mean? I couldn't answer. Brian pounded on the door. Is anyone in there? Hey! No answer. I leaned closer. From inside, so faint it could have been imagined, came a voice. A child's voice. Thin, breathless. Help! Brian kicked the door. It didn't budge. Key, he snapped. In the booth, we ran back, boots slamming, corridors stretching too long. The booth was suddenly too warm when we burst in like a lie. I yanked open the key cabinet. My hands shook. Labels, slots. Cold storage. Empty. Brian swore under his breath. I glanced at the monitors. Camera 7's feed had frozen. In the far end of the corridor, the shape had returned. Closer now. Not a shadow. A figure. Tall, thin, shoulders dropped. A head that looked like it wore a Santa hat, but wrong. Slanted, like it didn't fit the skull beneath it. The figure stepped toward the camera. The timestamp jittered. Brian saw it too. What is that? He whispered. I zoomed. The figure had no face. Or rather, where a face should be was a smooth darkness. And within that darkness, something caught the light. Wet, reflective. Not an eye. More like a surface. Then the booth door was tapped from outside. Tap, tap, tap. 3 times. We both froze. Brian swallowed. I locked it, right? The tapping came again, slower, polite. Tap, tap, tap. I lifted my flashlight but didn't move. On the monitor, the faceless figure took another step. Outside, the booth window fogged as if warm breath had hit it. A fingerprint appeared. Then another. Then 2 small hands pressed flat on the glass. Child-sized hands, but the fingers were too long. Brian whispered, "No." The prints vanished. The glass cleared as if nothing had been there. Outside, footsteps moved around the booth on the snow. Crunch, crunch, crunch. One circle, another. Not walking away, circling. Like an animal testing a cage. The radio clicked on by itself. That same muffled child voice with the same unnatural calm. Door open." Then softer. "Merry Christmas." Something inside me snapped. Some part that still believed in coincidence. Brian jerked toward the door. "Enough!" he shouted. "Who's out there?" He reached for the handle. I grabbed his arm. "Don't." Brian whipped around, eyes wild. "There's a kid bleeding inside." "There's someone outside. What do we do?" The footsteps stopped. A scraping sound slid across the roof of the booth. Like nails. We both looked up. In the thin, dark line of the roof edge, a shape appeared for a heartbeat, something hunched, moving on 4 limbs but with the wrong angles. Then it vanished. Brian's voice broke. "That's not a person." I tried to tell myself it was an animal, fox, dog, anything, but the faceless figure on camera 7 had already carved a place in my mind. 00:12 a.m. The facility lights flickered, off, on, off, on. The screens went black, returned. For a moment, the booth was swallowed by darkness, and in that darkness I felt a body close to the glass, a presence that didn't breathe like us. When the lights came back, nothing stood there. Brian slammed his fist on the desk. "This is insane. We have to get into cold storage." "No key," I said. "We break it." He grabbed the emergency pry bar. "You coming?" I didn't want to, but staying alone felt worse. Fear doesn't multiply, it isolates. We stepped into the yard. The snow thickened again. The wind had fully died. That was the worst part. Snow falling in perfect silence, like it was landing on a grave. At the cold storage door, the blood had thinned, almost as if it had been wiped from inside. But the smell remained, metal and rust. Brian jammed the pry bar into the door seam. He forced it. The lock resisted, then gave a sharp crack. The door opened a finger's width. Cold air slammed out like a living thing. My face burned. The moment we stepped inside, every hair on my arms rose. Dim yellow lights, rows of shelving, pallets, boxes, a warehouse that felt like the inside of a freezer. And the smell. Even in cold, it was there. Blood. On the floor near the entrance, a smeared trail. Something had been dragged. Brian followed it. I followed Brian. The trail led between shelves. At the corner of one aisle, I saw something that didn't belong. A small Christmas present. Red ribbon, neat. In that place, it looked obscene, like decoration at a crime scene. Brian stared at it. "What the hell is that doing here?" He moved closer. Every part of me wanted him not to touch it. It looked meaningful, too deliberate. Brian reached for the ribbon. The moment his fingers brushed it, a tiny bell rang inside the box. The same wrong bell sound we'd heard earlier. Brian jerked his hand back. "Someone's messing with us," he said. A shadow moved at the far end of the aisle. Not a flicker. Movement, a body slipping behind shelves. Brian shouted, "Hey!" and ran after it. "Brian, stop." I yelled, but the sound died in the freezer air. He vanished into the maze. In a warehouse like that, every aisle looks identical. Your sense of direction collapses in minutes. "Brian," I called. No reply. Only a faint scraping sound. Then distant, Brian's voice. "Over here, now." Panic sharpened his words. I ran, turned corners, followed the sound. Brian stood at the door of a small office inside the unit. The door was half open. A reddish light leaked through the crack, as if the room breathed in a different color. Brian whispered, "There's someone in there." I stepped closer and looked in. The office was concrete and small. A desk, a chair, a cabinet, and on the floor, someone sitting. A child, back turned. A Santa hat perched on the head. Old and dirty. The child didn't move. Brian spoke gently, as if afraid volume would break something. "Hey, are you okay?" The child's head began to turn. Too far. Too smooth. Brian stepped back. The child turned fully toward us. There was no face. Where a face should be. A smooth surface, like ice over nothing. Beneath it, something shifted faintly, as if shadow moved under thin skin. The child spoke without a mouth. Door open." Brian screamed. The child stood up, not like a child stands, but like a puppet pulled upright in one motion. Then the lights died, pitch black. My lungs locked. In the darkness, the bell sound rang again, and a whisper close to my ear, so intimate it felt like breath. "Merry Christmas." Brian shouted. "Run!" We ran blind. I slammed into shelves, stumbled, didn't fall. Lost direction. Behind us, something moved, not with footsteps, but with a dry, cracking sound, like joints shifting the wrong way. The lights snapped back. We were near the main door. It was closed, but in front of it stood the thing from the monitor, the child-sized form, faceless, too still. Brian stopped short. I stopped behind him. The door was an exit, a boundary. The faceless surface looked at us, no eyes but attention. And in that smooth darkness, I saw a reflection. Not the reflection of the room. My reflection, as if the blank face was a mirror. And in that mirror, I was wearing a Santa hat. My brain said no, not possible. Brian raised the pry bar and swung at the child. Metal cut the air, but it didn't hit flesh. The pry bar struck something invisible like a wall. Brian's arm jolted. He tried to pull the bar back. He couldn't, as if the air held it. The child stepped closer. Brian's hand began to bleed suddenly, fingers opening as if sliced by something you couldn't see. He screamed and dropped the bar. The door slammed shut. A heavy final sound thud, and then something happened that I will never be able to explain in a way that makes sense, except that it made a cruel kind of sense afterward. All across the cold storage unit, bells began to ring. Not one, many, everywhere. Every aisle, every shelf, as if Christmas presents were hidden in every corner, waiting to mock us. I covered my ears. Inside the ringing, I began to hear voices. Children's voices. Many of them, all repeating one phrase over and over. "Door open! Door open! Door open!" And threaded through them one adult voice identical to the supervisor's. "Return. Return, return, return." That's when I understood. Every time we tried to retreat, we were being pulled deeper. Return to the booth, led us to the freezer. Return from the freezer, shut the door. Return wasn't a direction. It was an instruction to repeat. Brian looked at me, tears in his eyes. "This is a trap," he said. My mind flashed to the single footprint. Not a sign someone had walked in. A sign something had been placed. A baited hook left for us. The bell stopped. Instant silence. The office door creaked open again. The faceless child stepped out. But it wasn't alone. Behind it rose a taller shape. The thin silhouette Brian had seen on the booth roof. The thing that moved wrong. The shape bent down, took the Santa hat off the child's head. In its hand, the hat seemed to stretch as if made of flesh instead of cloth. The shape placed the hat on its own head. And then a face appeared. My face. My eyes, my cheekbones. My expression. It looked like me too well. And with my voice it said, "Door open." Brian whispered behind me. "You didn't say that, right?" I didn't. But a memory detonated in my mind. A week earlier, during Christmas decorations, I had seen a child outside the fence, near the woods, alone, thin jacket, barely moving in the snow. Something in me had clenched. I'd wanted to go over, but I didn't. Because protocol, because the area was restricted, because someone will handle it. I had shouted from a distance instead, "Hey, you can't be there." The child had looked at me, and I had looked away. Because I had work, because it wasn't my job, because it was easier not to see. Now the child was here. Or something wearing the idea of a child was, and the guilt rose in me like acid. Brian ran to the main door, slammed against it. "Open, open!" It didn't move. The thing wearing my face stepped forward. It smiled, not with teeth, but with a wrong curve, like a mask learning how. It raised a hand. In that hand was a key. The cold storage key. Blood on it. It held the key out to us. A choice. If I took it, would the door open, or would it open something else? Brian sobbed. Please, give it." The key hovered. Brian reached. I grabbed his wrist. "No," I hissed. "That's not an exit." Brian turned on me, eyes fevered. "Then we die here." The thing wearing my face whispered in the supervisor's exact tone. "Return." And suddenly every detail lined up. The footprint. The radio. The flat voice telling us to go back. The way going back only led deeper. I looked at Brian. "Don't take it," I begged. "This is how it gets you." Brian laughed, hysterical. "How is that worse than this?" and he yanked the key free. The instant the metal touched his skin, Brian's face changed. His panic drained away. His eyes went blank, like something had slipped inside him and sat down. He turned slowly toward me, and with my voice he said, "Door open." I stepped back. "Brian." He walked to the door, inserted the key. The lock turned. The door opened, but it did not open to the yard. It opened to darkness, not a corridor, not a room, a void, a nothing that felt like winter air with blood underneath it. Brian stepped forward. "Stop!" I screamed. He didn't even flinch. He walked into the void and disappeared. The door swung shut by itself. Silence again. I stood alone in the cold storage unit, shaking so hard my teeth hurt. The faceless child approached me. Its blank surface shifted. In it, I no longer saw myself. I saw Brian. Brian was walking on snow inside that darkness, barefoot, and each step left a single footprint. One, then nothing, then another. The child whispered, "Christmas night." Door open. My knees buckled. I don't remember walking out. I remember the bells stopping. I remember my hands numb. I remember the feeling that the facility had become a mouth, and we were inside it. When they found me at dawn, I wasn't in the booth. I was sitting in the snow in front of the cold storage door, wearing a Santa hat, holding a key, and in front of me in the fresh snow there was a single barefoot footprint. Just one. Brian was gone. Police came. Search teams swept the woods. They checked every room, every aisle, every freezer door. They reviewed the CCTV. The cameras showed Brian and me entering cold storage. Then static, grain, a glitch. Then I was alone again, sitting in the snow, holding the key. The officers asked me a dozen times, "Where's Brian?" I couldn't answer, because the only thing I truly understood deep in my bones was what the night had been trying to teach me. That void wasn't a place you go. It was a repeat, a loop, a consequence. Some doors don't open to let you out. They open to let your guilt in, and on Christmas night, the door is open.